The empath doesn't walk away because they stop loving. They walk away because they started loving themselves. This truth strikes at the core of what often keeps an empath trapped in a toxic cycle for far too long. For the empath, love is not just a feeling, it's a mission. It's an instinct. It's a sacred calling to nurture, to heal, to fix. They see brokenness and immediately want to repair it. They see pain and feel it as their own. They believe with all their heart that their love has the power to transform even the darkest soul. And so they stay, they endure, they try harder, they forgive again and again and again. The narcissist sees this and exploits it. Where the empath sees connection, the narcissist sees control. Where the empath sees growth, the narcissist sees supply. The narcissist becomes a master illusionist, manipulating emotions with surgical precision, offering just enough hope to keep the empath engaged, but never enough truth to foster real change. And because the empath love deeply, they interpret manipulation as wounded behavior, deceit as fear, and abuse as trauma that still needs healing. They stay, not because they are weak, but because their love is wide enough to include the broken parts of the person hurting them. They believe their presence is redemptive. They think if they just give a little more, pray a little harder, or understand a little deeper, the narcissist will change. But over time, something begins to shift. The empath starts to notice that their joy is fading, their spirit is tired, their identity is unraveling. They are giving so much that there is almost nothing left to give. Their life becomes a cycle of highs and lows, confusion and clarity, hope and heartbreak. They begin to ask silent questions in the middle of the night. Why do I feel so alone in a relationship that demands so much from me? Why am I constantly doubting my own intuition? Why does love feel like suffering? Then comes the awakening. Sometimes it's triggered by a betrayal. Sometimes it comes in the stillness. Sometimes it's a slow buildup, an invisible inner roar that gets louder every day. But when it comes, it is undeniable. The empath realizes that loving someone else cannot come at the cost of betraying themselves. They realize that they have confused loyalty with self-abandonment and commitment with self-erasure. They see for the first time that true love does not diminish, manipulate, or control. It does not gaslight, belittle, or punish. Real love nurtures, uplifts, and honors. And so they make the hardest decision they've ever made, not to stop loving the other person, but to start loving themselves, to honor their intuition, to reclaim their energy, to heal the parts of themselves that believe they had to suffer to be worthy. They walk away not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with hatred, but with courage, because now they understand that their love is too sacred to be wasted on someone who only sees it as a tool for control. They don't walk away in anger. They walk away in revelation. They walk away not to give up on someone else, but to finally choose themselves. That moment of choosing self-love over sacrifice becomes the beginning of transformation. It is where the empath begins to truly understand the power of their heart, not as a weapon to be used against them, but as a compass to guide them home. And once they walk away, there is no going back, because self-love, once awakened, does not settle for anything less than peace, authenticity, and divine alignment. The narcissist feeds on light, but the super empath learns to protect their power. This dynamic is one of the most profound and misunderstood aspects of toxic relationships. The empath by nature carries a radiant inner light. It's not just emotional sensitivity, it's spiritual discernment, a deep knowing and a capacity to feel and connect with the energy of others in ways that defy logic. That light is healing. It's rare, it draws people in. It can walk into a room and shift the atmosphere without saying a word, but while that light attracts the wounded, the broken, and the humble, it also attracts the predatory. The narcissist sees the light and they don't admire it, they envy it. They crave it not because they want to honor it, but because they want to possess it. Where the empath sees mutual connection, the narcissist sees opportunity. The narcissist is an energy vampire, starved of true identity and inner peace, constantly looking for external sources of validation, admiration, and emotional reaction. And when they encounter an empath, especially a super empath, they find their ultimate target, not because the empath is weak, but because they are powerful in a way the narcissist can never replicate. The empath offers love without agenda, listens without judgment, forgives with grace, and believes in the goodness of people. To the narcissist, this isn't just desirable, it's exploitable. They mirror the empath's dreams, values, and emotions to gain trust. They love bomb, they idealize, they charm. But slowly, they begin to chip away at the empath's confidence. They use confusion as a weapon. They distort reality with lies and half-truths. They project their own shame onto the empath and then punish them for reacting. The goal is always the same: to dim the light, to weaken the spirit, to extract every ounce of power without ever replenishing. But the super empath is different from the typical empath. The super empath not only feels deeply, they see deeply. They may get caught in the web for a season, but there comes a moment when they start noticing the patterns. They begin to recognize that this isn't just dysfunction, it's design. That the narcissist's cruelty isn't accidental, it's intentional. And something inside them, something ancient and holy begins to rise. A voice they silenced starts to speak. A boundary they ignored becomes non-negotiable. They realize they were never created to be someone's emotional dumping ground, someone's silent healer, someone's spiritual crutch. Protecting their power becomes the priority. They no longer over-explain, over-apologize, or overextend. They stop dimming their intuition to make someone else feel comfortable in their dysfunction. They stop explaining their worth to someone who was never interested in understanding it. They don't just detach, they upgrade their entire frequency, and suddenly the narcissist games lose their effect. The manipulations fall flat. The silent treatments become irrelevant. The power dynamic flips. Because when the empath steps into self-awareness, they step into authority. At this level, the empath no longer looks to rescue others. They look to protect their own peace. They don't carry guilt for walking away. They carry wisdom. They return it to sender. Their boundaries become sacred. Their silence becomes strategy. Their energy becomes selective because the super empath understands that their light is a gift, not a resource to be plundered. And once they learn how to protect it, they become untouchable by the very forces that once tried to consume them. Every gaslight becomes fuel. Every silent treatment becomes sacred clarity. At first, these tactics don't look like lessons. They look like confusion, chaos, and pain. When the empath is caught in the web of a narcissist, they're not dealing with ordinary behavior. They're dealing with a strategy of emotional warfare. Gaslighting is one of the narcissist's most powerful tools. It's a calculated effort to distort the empath's reality, to make them question their memory, their perception, even their sanity. It starts small, subtle denials, contradictions, or dismissals, but over time it erodes the empath's sense of self. They begin to question what they know in their spirit to be true. They become dependent on the narcissist for validation, for clarity, for approval. Then comes the silent treatment. It's not silence born from conflict resolution or reflection. It's weaponized absence. It's control through emotional starvation. It's punishment for stepping out of line, for expressing needs, for showing strength. The narcissist uses silence to teach the empath a lesson that love is conditional and affection can be taken away in an instant. For the empath, this creates a storm of emotional turmoil. They internalize the silence as rejection. They scramble to restore peace. They take responsibility for a disconnection they didn't cause. But the turning point comes when the empath begins to observe instead of absorb. When they start paying attention to the patterns instead of the promises. When they stop reacting and start reflecting. The gaslighting that once created self-doubt now triggers awareness. They recognize that the confusion isn't coming from within, it's being projected onto them. They begin to trust their intuition over the narcissist narrative. The empath starts asking new questions. Why am I questioning myself so much around this person? Why does clarity return when they're not around? These realizations begin to build something powerful. Discernment. And the silent treatment, what used to feel like abandonment starts to feel like freedom. What used to feel like punishment now becomes protection. The empath begins to welcome the silence, not fear it. Because in that space, in the stillness where the narcissist withdraws, the empath reconnects with themselves. The silence becomes sacred. It becomes a moment to breathe, to think clearly, to hear their own voice without interference. The same silence that was meant to wound now becomes a window into truth. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It comes through inner work, reflection, and often heartbreak. But the super empath is not just someone who feels deeply. They are someone who learns deeply. They take the tactics that were meant to break them and use them as building blocks. Every gaslight that tried to distort their reality becomes fuel to reclaim their identity. Every silent treatment that tried to isolate them becomes space where they discover their worth. The empath becomes more than a survivor. They become awakened. They begin to understand that the very things used against them were revealing the narcissist patterns, not their own shortcomings. They start recognizing that the emotional whiplash wasn't proof of love. It was proof of manipulation. They turn that pain into data, that data into wisdom, and that wisdom into boundaries. The narcissist, who once had full access to the empath's mind and heart, begins to lose their grip. The manipulation stopped working. The emotional game stopped getting played because the empath no longer needs validation. They have revelation. They no longer seek to fix the narcissist. They seek to protect their peace. And what was once a cycle of confusion becomes a season of clarity. What was once torment becomes transformation. When the empath walks away, it's not a goodbye, it's a war cry. For too long, the empath has been silent in their suffering. They've cried behind closed doors, smiled through emotional bruises, and held space for someone who only ever drained it. They've prayed for change, waited for accountability, and convinced themselves that love would be enough to break through the narcissist's wall. But the narcissist never wanted love. They wanted control. They wanted dominance wrapped in the illusion of intimacy. And the empath, being heart-centered and full of grace, stayed longer than they should have. They mistook manipulation for miscommunication. They confused inconsistency with complexity. They believed if they could just love harder, everything would align. But something happens in the soul of the empath when they hit their limit. It's not always loud. Sometimes it comes after the last lie, the final gaslight, or the millionth silent treatment. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a whisper from within. Other times it crashes like thunder, shaking them awake. But when it comes, it changes everything. The empath no longer looks at the narcissist with hope. They look at them with clarity. The spell's broken. The illusion is shattered. And what once looked like love now looks like emotional warfare. This is the moment of the war cry, because when the empath walks away, it's not out of weakness, it's not a silent retreat, it's not a small uncertain step, it's a declaration, it's an uprising, it's the reclaiming of their voice, their power, their destiny, it's a loud spiritual yes to their healing and an unapologetic no to further abuse. The empath doesn't leave because they're tired of loving. The empath leaves because they're done being spiritually suffocated. They leave because they realize that staying is no longer compassion, it's self-destruction. And that walk is power in motion. The narcissist might smirk at first, thinking it's another emotional game, another attempt to get a reaction. But this time, it's different. This time, the empath isn't crying, they're calm. This time, they're not begging, they're done. The door closes with finality, not fear. And behind it is not a broken soul, but a reborn one. This isn't just someone exiting a relationship. It's a soul re-entering its purpose. The war cry isn't about vengeance. It's not about proving anything. It's about rising. It's about declaring to the universe, to the inner child, to the soul itself, I choose me. It's the sound of generational chains breaking, the sound of years of manipulation unraveling, the sound of light refusing to be dimmed another day. That war cry echoes far beyond the narcissist. It shifts the spiritual atmosphere. It tells every other empath still in bondage that they too can rise. It tells every trauma-bound soul that freedom is not only possible, it's necessary. There's power in that cry. Power that was buried under guilt, obligation, and shame. Power that was suppressed by years of gaslighting, control, and fear. And now, unleashed, it becomes a force the narcissist can't manipulate, can't touch, and can't control. That cry speaks of boundaries, of wisdom, of survival turned into sacred strength. It speaks of knowing who you are and what you deserve. It speaks of a journey that cost everything and gave birth to someone unrecognizable in the best way. What the narcissist thought was a goodbye was really a breakthrough. What they thought was a retreat was actually a revolution. What they saw as the end was really the beginning of the empath's truest, most powerful self. And once that cry is released, there's no silencing it again. The super empath doesn't just survive, they rise, and the world will never be the same. This is not just about leaving a toxic relationship, it's about what happens after the escape. For the super empath, survival is never the end goal, it's the beginning of transformation. Survival is the moment they realize they've been walking through fire, not burning, but forging. Every tear, every heartbreak, every betrayal becomes part of their evolution. They don't just move on, they elevate. They don't just heal, they awaken to who they were always meant to be before they were manipulated, broken down, or made to question their worth. The super empath rises differently than most because they're not rising from a place of bitterness, they're rising from a place of deep understanding. They've stared manipulation in the face, they've danced with illusion, they've navigated emotional minefields designed to keep them trapped. And still they come out not hardened, but sharpened. Not closed off, but more discerning. Their heart isn't bitter, it's stronger. Their boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. They don't fear love, they just finally know what real love is supposed to feel like. The narcissist never expected the empath to rise because everything about the narcissist strategy is designed to convince the empath that they're small, that they're crazy, that they're incapable of standing alone. The narcissist spent so long crafting an alternate reality where the empath played the role of caretaker, rescuer, subordinate, emotional supplier. But what the narcissist didn't realize is that empaths may fall deep, but they don't fall forever. There's something divine in them, something eternal that refuses to be extinguished. That part begins to stir. It wakes them up at 3 a.m. with a whisper saying, there's more. You were made for more. When they rise, they begin to remember. They remember who they were before the trauma, before the gaslighting, before the false narratives. They reconnect with their intuition. Their creativity returns. Their voice comes back with thunder in it. They start speaking truth, not just to others, but to themselves. And with every step forward, they rewrite the story the narcissist tried to script for them. The story that said they were too much, too emotional, too intense, too naive. Now, those same traits become their superpowers. Emotional depth becomes discernment. Sensitivity becomes strategy. Intensity becomes wisdom. And as they rise, they don't rise quietly. Their healing makes noise. Their growth makes ripples. People notice. Some admire it. Some are intimidated by it. But no one can ignore it because when a super empath reclaims their power, the very atmosphere around them changes. They inspire others. Their story becomes a lighthouse for those still lost in the storm. Their presence becomes permission for others to heal. Two, they break generational cycles just by existing in wholeness. What once was a victim is now a visionary. What once was broken is now unshakable. The super empath who rising redefines what strength looks like. It's not just resilience, it's revelation. It's the moment they realize they didn't lose themselves in the battle, they found themselves through it. And the world they re-enter is not the same world they left, because now they walk with purpose. Now they speak with authority. Now they love with intention. They are no longer available for anything that drains their light or disrespects their energy. They attract different people, different opportunities, a different reality altogether. Their frequency has changed and the world must adjust accordingly. They didn't just walk away, they leveled up, and in doing so they proved that rising isn't just possible, it's inevitable for those who remember who they are.